Grade 7s, welcome. This is lesson 5.1, the beginning of chapter 5, entitled War and Peace. In this lesson, we'll take a look at the chapter inquiry, which is how did military events and their consequences contribute to the foundations of Canada. We'll take a look at the key concepts that are here, as well as some of the vocabulary terms. So stick around and let's learn something. War and Peace, Chapter 5, and like Tolstoy's War and Peace, this is a really long chapter, but it is a good chapter nonetheless. There's a lot of fun that we're going to have in this chapter, learning about the early beginnings of how Canada is wanting to become a country. The question that we're trying to answer in this chapter is how did the military events and their consequences contribute to the foundations of Canada? And the concept that we're going to be taking a look at here are conquest and consequences. So we'll be learning a lot about that in this chapter. You've got a good amount of vocabulary words here. We have superpower, neutral, siege, eviction, assimilation, accommodation, bilingualism, facts, opinions, and bias. We're going to go back to that chapter concept for a quick minute here. And it's all about conquest and consequences. And now in 2020, we have been known here in Canada, we have been known for our peacekeeping endeavors, and we work together to solve problems. And oftentimes our military is in with the UN, and we go on peacekeeping missions, and we're experts at that, and we help other countries who don't get along, because countries don't always get along. Newsflash. We help them try to resolve any kind of conflict that they have, because other countries, they often are in disputes amongst each other. And that leads to war, that leads to conflict, and oftentimes Canada is called in. But we weren't always like that. We've had our own disputes before here in North America, and that's what we're going to be learning about. And we've had disputes before because the two European imperial countries that contributed to the creation of Canada, France and England, it was very common that they were always in a conflict with each other, and they were always fighting with each other. And when they were fighting with each other overseas, that kind of spilled over here in North America and the rest of their colonies around the world. One of the things that we're going to take a look at are superpowers. A superpower is a country really that is more powerful than almost every single superpower that is in, or almost any other country that is in existence. And right now we have a handful of potential superpowers that exist today. We've got the United States, we got China, we have Russia, the European Union, Brazil, India. These are potential superpowers today. They are dominating the world stage in politics, in economy, in military, and all of those areas. So they are now our current potential superpowers. And I say potential superpowers because, well, it's always evolving. It's not static. It's always changing. So, but right now these are our superpowers. And if we take a look back in our history of Canada, and this story that we're doing, in the 1700s, France and England, still currently right now they're in the European Union, but France and England individually were competing superpowers back then. They were both very rich, they had strong economies, and they had huge armies. And this brings us to the French and English at war. They were constantly in conflict with each other. From like 1690 to 1763, they were always fighting with each other in Europe, in the colonies, here in North America. They were doing that because they wanted the same things. They wanted resources and they wanted more territory, which includes North America. And they fought wherever they could get a chance. They fought on land and they fought at sea as well. And there are different perspectives when it comes to war. And this is taken right out of your textbook. But here's how the different views of war kind of were for the early Canadians, both the English, the French, and our First Nations. So you can see here we have a Halifax merchant. This is our first perspective on the war. If our Navy can defeat the French, we will have a much larger market for our goods. Should I be planning to set up business in Quebec? So this Halifax merchant is thinking in terms of the economy. If the British control the seas, we have a huge market of potential customers. So we can have customers in Europe. We can also have customers in Quebec. The Acadian farmer, well, the perspective from a Canadian farmer is this: why can't both sides just leave us in peace? Why do we have to choose to support one side or the other? You are going to see in this chapter that the Acadians wanted to be neutral. That's one of your vocab words. They wanted to be neutral. They didn't want to get involved because they were Acadians. They were Canadiens. They didn't want to be pulled into this war between the French and the English because the Acadians were doing and creating their own culture. A Canadien habitant, if the English come here, we will be forced to give up our livelihoods, homes, rights, language, and religion. Are we going to have to do all that? So the Canadiens, they are worried because, again, they have their own culture, but they're still French. Are the British, if the British win, will they be allowed to keep those traditions and culture alive? A Mi'kmaq woman would say, "We have lived peacefully with the Acadians. The British have been our enemy since they raided us to enslave us. If the British come, will they take our land?" The Mi'kmaq and the French, they are allies. And that will then make the Mi'kmaq and the British natural enemies. So they're wondering, well, what's going to happen now? If the British come, will we lose everything? And then the Mohawk trapper. We have a strong alliance with the French. Will we have to defend them in this war? What is this war going to mean for the fur trade? So again, an alliance with the French and the British are at war. Who's going to be pulled in? Are allies going to be pulled in and be expected to fight in this war? And if they fight in this war, and if they lose, then what happens to the allies of the group that loses? We'll be learning all about this in this chapter. What I'd like you to do right now is head over to your notebook and complete the questions for this part of the chapter.